Hi. Good evening. So, I'm going to talk to you about King, and many of you probably know our products better than the name of the company itself. I guess, a lot of you know Candy Crush. It's the most, or the world's favorite game. A very large proportion of the world has played the game and is still playing the game today. And I think what we wanted to do today is there's been a lot of discussions about a lot of the numbers about the game and about the company. Very often you hear about the number of players on any given day, the money that Candy Crush is making on any day. Or also there's been a lot of discussion about our IPO. We've had a very high profile IPO. I think it was the largest tech IPO out of Europe ever, which we had last year. And so what I thought I would do today is to take you under the hood, so to talk to you about what's behind the numbers and behind some of the glamour that's been associated with the product, and then with the story. And to do that, I thought I would use numbers. So I have picked 10 numbers here, and I'm gonna, I have a story or a message to tell you about every one of those. And so I'd like to start with actually the number 5, and this is it. So this is, here are the 5 founders. Actually, there were 6 founders, but it's down to 5 now. And there are a couple of things that are interesting about the founders. First, they're still there. And the company is not that young. And all of them are still with us, and they have scaled with the business, which is very unusual. So if you go from right to left, on the right, you have Patrick Stimner, who's the chief architect. Then in the medallion, you have Thomas Hardwig, who's the chief technology officer. You have, in the middle, and he's very well known, it's Riccardo Zacconi, who's the CEO. On the left, you have Sebastian Knudsen, who's the chief product officer and the brain behind Candy Crush and many of the other games. And finally, you have Lars Magren, who's on the left, who's running the Stockholm operations. So, first fact, they're still there, which is quite amazing. And the second fact is they're all quite old, right? And if you look closely, I mean, seriously, they're all quite old. There's even one who's older than 50. And we believe that, some of the reasons why the company has been a success is because they're quite old, and they were there, all of them in '99, and they all have the tire tracks on their back. And I will try to take you through that as we go through the story. So the second thing is, not only are they old, there's a good reason. The company itself is really old. The company was founded in 2003. That's what it looked like. There's been a while since you've seen a web page like this, right? And the company started in 2003, and that was a tournament website where you could play for cash for very tiny sums, and it was very successful. It grew, it was profitable almost immediately, it doubled in size every year, it was profitable from the start, and then something happened. Facebook happened, and the business stalled, and they had a huge challenge, and they basically bet half of the company on Facebook. And finally, very late, actually, they managed to crack Facebook at a time where everybody was saying it was too late. At the time, Zynga already had the top 10 games on Facebook, and we were left behind. Well, it managed to crack Facebook, and that was in 2011. And then a little later, with the launch of Candy Crush on mobile, it cracked mobile. So it's a company that's now 12 years old, and that's gone through 2 massive pivotal changes. And so, today the cash tournament business still exists. It's about 0.5% of the revenue of the company. So we've kept our roots, but obviously it's a very different business today with 2 massive pivots behind it. The next thing I wanted to talk to you about is, obviously everybody knows the main brand, and everybody knows Candy Crush. But the reality is much more complex than that. The company has been making games for more than 12 years, and it's made more than 200 games. And there's often the impression when you talk about King and you talk about our products that it's two guys in a garage and it came overnight. That's just not true. And it's not true of many of the business or many of the products that you see out there, and you're under the impression that it just happened and that was quick. There's just a huge amount of work and heart and passion and knowledge behind this. And it took them actually 7 years to find Candy, because Candy, the first version of Candy Crush, was launched on King.com in 2010. And today, Candy Crush on mobile is almost 3 years old. So when we launched on mobile, the story was, there is no longevity in mobile games. They go up the charts and down the charts, and then the next one comes, and the next one comes. And it's going to last a few weeks, or it's going to last a few months. That was completely wrong. So if you look at the charts today, Candy Crush and then the sister title, which is called Candy Crush Soda, are still in the top 5 on all the key platforms worldwide. That's also the case for for the other franchises that you see out there. So not only do we have Candy Crush, we also have games called Farm Heroes or Bubble Witch or Pet Rescue. And Farm Heroes, which is a lot less well known, and I'm not sure how many of you know the title, is larger than most gaming companies worldwide. So it's not a one-hit wonder. It's not a one-game company. There's actually much more depth and breadth to what we do. 12. And 12 is the number of studios. When I joined the company, which is about 5 years ago, we had one studio. And when you have one studio or one co-location for technology and product, everything is much simpler, right? Everybody is under the same roof. And typically, the type of discussions you're going to have is, we don't need product owners. It's not clear we need anybody in HR. It's not clear we need anybody in finance. If you talk to, hardcore developers, with deep religion, they will tell you, actually, you hardly need anybody but developers and artists to make a game company. And that's quite true as long as you are in one location. But as soon as you open a second location, what happens is the complexity of what you do grows exponentially, even though the number of locations might grow in linear fashion. And if you stick to your religion, which is to be super agile and only have developers and only have artists, you're going to break your company. So there is no way around when you scale. You're going to have to create new functions. You're going to have to create processes. And functions like product owners for some of our technology products only had to, we kind of had to impose them. It took a while because when you look at the map, we had all our product and technology in Stockholm, and the first thing we did was to open a second studio in Malmö, which is kind of the suburb of Stockholm, right? So it was quite easy, and they could fly down there all the time. But then soon thereafter, we started opening Bucharest, and we opened London, and we opened Barcelona, and then we went through an incredible wrenching time where, as all the staff at these sites were desperate to get the support from Stockholm, and it wouldn't work unless we had to mature and change the way we were doing things. So, the company went through a transformation, and it retained as much of its agility as it can, but you can't just stick to your, full agile religion as you scale to this size. 15 billion, again, when you talk very often, there's discussion about big data, and King is probably one of the largest big data companies out of Europe, if not the largest. So every day we have about 1.5 billion gameplays. Every day we generate more than 15 billion daily events. So for the ones who like numbers, that's like 3.6 terabytes of data. We can run 9 million concurrent users at the same time. So 9 million people can play games at the same time. It's all great, right? Great numbers. We use them all the time at conference. This is the hardest thing we do. It's been hard from day one. It remains incredibly hard. We have some of our strongest and brightest people, working on this and trying to fix this every day of the week. There is no, magic to the big data. It's just extremely hard work. And if you want to build a business that's going to scale, and if you want to think about it you're going to have to think about these issues and get a right chief architect very early on. So if you want to build a highly scalable business, think about it very early, architect it properly, and get it done. An interesting data point is, I mean, we've been the largest partner of Facebook for quite a long time. They only took us seriously when we could prove to them that we could basically run 1 million daily active users without breaking the infrastructure. Until then, they were hardly picking up the phone. When we got to 1 million, they started talking to us with, I wouldn't call it respect, but consideration. Okay. My next number is 56,000. Okay, that's not the hardest thing we're going to do. It's the most important thing you will ever do. It's recruitment. And so, last year, I mean, I was discussing that with David. We hired about 800 people. We peaked in April, we hired 98 people in a month. We had 800 people working in the company, so that means you grow your company by 12.5% a month, which means also that you need to absorb that, which is an incredible effort. And if you get that wrong, then you're going to create a lot of issues that will take months and quarters to resolve. So hiring the right people for your company, is the most important thing you do. And again, there's no way around it. There are, a few basic rules that we've put in place fairly early. Typically, collective wisdom is better than, single-person wisdom, right? So, you need several people to interview. We use 6. I read the book by, Eric Schmidt about Google recently. They've proven statistically that actually either 4 or 5 is fine. So I need to review my 6th number. But we have, at the very least, 6 interviews. You always have a cross-functional interview, because if you basically have, a function which is not going well, and they interview and they recruit their own people without having somebody from another function basically checking in, you can create silos where you have issue, and you're going to basically grow your silo possibly to a very large size before you step in, and you're going to try to fix it, and that might create some damage. So the other thing that's also less common, and which is not very politically correct, I'm sorry about this, is if you are in doubt, it's not about giving a chance. You should not hire, because if you make the wrong hire in a company that's scaling very fast, the time and the energy and the focus you're going to have to put in addressing the issue will be much, much more expensive than the time you can spend essentially focusing on growing your company and developing your people. So, another reason why you should be having fairly tight processes in your recruitment is because if you get your recruitment wrong, and even one person wrong, the damage might be extremely material. So, back to numbers. And here we have 5 key pillars to what we do. Again, back to the story, impression from the outside is, 2 guys and a dog in a garage make Candy Crush, and that's an overnight success. It's not that true. The reality, I mean, the way we look at our business, the reason why we believe we've been successful is because we do well or very well 5 different things. And only one of them is the magic, right? I mean, if you look at games, it's all about art and the magic, and that's the first of them. We're a game company before anything else. And so among the 5 things you need to do, the first one is art. And when we talk about art, what we mean, it's original intellectual property. So for a game like Candy Crush, art is one level of Candy Crush. It's the gameplay, it's the game mechanic where you move, the little candies and something happens. But if you have that, that's not enough, right? Because you have a lot of great games out there with great game mechanics and great IP. You need then to wrap this into a business model. It's what we call an envelope. That's what we call the saga. And if you have great IP and you don't have a great business model, you're just not going to get there. And so we call that the craft, and it's the business model you put around the art. Once you've done that, the next thing that you need to crack, and that's, again, changed, I think, from the old days, is you need to you need to balance your game. So if you look, so I've been working, I've done a lot of things in my career. I've worked in financial services. I was a management consultant. I've also worked in enterprise software in application dependency mapping, which was a 3D mapping. I've never worked in a more quantitative company than a game company, than King. It's by far the most data-driven and quantitative. And so when I'm talking about science, we have about 110 people, mathematicians, statisticians, operational research people, physicists, people, with multiple degrees in artificial intelligence and pattern recognition, all working on optimizing essentially the games and optimizing the network. Because if you look at our games, they are progress-based. So the key for our games is to balance the emotional satisfaction that comes from progress versus the challenge that means that you will be engaged. I'm not going to use another word, and that you will keep playing, right? Because if the game is too easy, you're just going to churn, and if the game is too hard, you will churn as well. And balancing that is one of the main reasons why I think we believe we've been very successful. Fourth is technology, because if you have hundreds of millions of players, you need a highly scalable architecture. And the fifth one is marketing, because you need to acquire your hundreds of millions of players. And once you've acquired them, you need to retain them. So if you look at my job day-to-day as the CEO, essentially, I need to keep these five in harmony. I need to balance them. It's like if one of them gets too strong, if science gets too strong, they will pinch. Pinching in our world means they're going to squeeze too hard. They will try to squeeze money out of the players, which is obviously not what we're supposed to do, and they will damage the network, right? So my job is about harmony. Okay, that's something else, right? So in $500 million. So in March 14, that was March of last year, we took the company public on the New York Stock Exchange. I think it was the largest IPO ever of a tech, if you can categorize King as a tech company, out of Europe. And many of you might have heard that it was also the worst large IPO of the last 20 years. So essentially, we floated the company, and at the end of the day, we ended 17% below the introduction price. And there's a message there, which is we were video streaming the IPO to all our team, and I was in the London office. Actually, I had flown back. I've done the roadshow, and then I was back in the office, and we had been discussing, because we were at the end of the IPO window last March. We were wondering, well, what do we do? What is the plan B if things don't go well? And actually, plan B was the same as plan A. So we gave exactly the same interviews, and we delivered exactly the same messages. And I think, Ricardo and the rest of the team did a fantastic job. And then we had our team basically watching the video streaming. After the interviews, they went back to their desk, they sat down, and they started working again. And that's what we would call as culture, right? So that's an incredibly strong culture. If we had a culture which was about, let's get to the IPO, and that's the end of the journey, and we're done at that point, I wouldn't be here talking to you today, right? So, we were invested and in our people. We've always, I think, worked very hard and make sure that passion was at the core of what we were doing. And I think the fact that we had such a strong culture that day allowed us basically to, keep going. Shortly after the IPO, we launched some of our greatest games. We launched Burberry Saga 2 and Candy Crush Soda, and we keep going strongly today. I think I need to accelerate. So I have a couple more numbers for you. Here, 44%. 44% is the unprompted brand recognition of Candy Crush in the US. So if you ask somebody without naming a mobile game, 45% of them or 44% will tell you about Candy Crush. So it's become an incredibly strong consumer brand. It's one of the largest consumer interactive brands in the US and in the rest of the world. And that means, it's a great opportunity. We have to nurture that and we have to treasure it. And we are working very hard to make sure that in 25 years, it will still be fresh. And you and your children and possibly your grandchildren will be able to enjoy the next generation of titles. And then finally, my last number is 340 million. That's the number of players who play our games every month. We don't believe it's a coincidence. It's because whatever we do it with quality, and we put retention always ahead of monetization, because we believe that if you build a loyal player base, you will crack monetization in the end. But that's also a huge responsibility, and so every time we think about what we do and the luck we have and the chance we have to offer our products to 350 million people, it's an incredible privilege, and it's the number one driver of hiring and retention for people, because a very small team can change the world. On these words, I will thank you for your attention. Thank you, David.